Alright, so now that we've watched the video and you've gotten some ideas about the Great Plains, turn your paper sideways just like this, and I want you to have Great Plains at the top as the title. So go ahead and put Great Plains. And then remember, the reason we call it a tree map is because after the title it branches out. You got your 3 branches. Alright? So, perfect. So go ahead and underline it, and then you can have your 3 branches come out of it just like that. Okay? And it's going to be homes, plants, and animals. Perfect. So now go ahead and underline it and have your 3 branches come down. Kyle, go ahead and have your 3 branches come down. Excellent. Perfect. And your lines don't have to be perfect, but as long as you got your 3 sections so we can write underneath them, that'll be just perfect. Yeah, you can go ahead and write those 3 words, yeah. Yeah, you can. Alright, and before we start writing, Zachary, why don't you sit right here? Robert, you can take your chair over to Kyle and Leah. And Leah, you can come just turn your chair around right here. And what I want you to do before we write anything down, I want you to discuss with your group. Tell some things that you should put in each group. Remember, we're talking about the Great Plains in the middle of the United States. Okay, tell some things like what kind of homes you think they lived in, what kind of plants they grew, and what kind of animals. Because there's really one animal that's super important. Don't shout it out. But I want you to whisper with your group. Take a couple minutes. Whisper, tell your group some things you know about the Great Plains that you learned from the video. Yes. Great Plains is in the middle of the U.S., remember? And the Eastern Woodlands was on the right-hand side. Okay. So Eastern Woodlands, we also read the book about it on the Buffalo Jump. That was the Great Plains. So tell some things with your group. Whisper, I should hear some whispering. Alright, what y'all say? Do you remember any plants? Okay. Crops, yeah. What's that? They use the buffalo stuff. Aggressive. Yeah, aggressive. Okay. Yes. Alright, what are some things you'll say? Okay, do you remember any plants?
We talk about the stuff on, like...
Yeah, like what kind of homes, what kind of plants. You don't have to write it yet because we're going to do that together, but you can discuss.
I want to go for... I know, she's just going to like...
That was the... It's fine. You can read it, but just... Alright, anything else y'all said? So buffalo's good. You got TP. Try to think of some plants you saw. What was the most important animal? finish up your conversations. Turn yourself so you can see me. Nylea, go ahead and go back to your seat. If you moved, you can go ahead back to your seat. Robert, you can go ahead back, buddy. Like 20 seconds. Hurry up. All right. Go ahead, Robert. All right. Let's start with homes. Raise your hand if you can tell me what kind of home the people in the Great Plains lived in. Maria. Not long houses. That was actually Eastern Woodlands. Teepees. Kind of a silly name. Teepees. Alright, so make sure you have teepees. Now what do they look like? Raise your hand. What shape do they kind of look like? Kind of look like a triangle, and they're kind of rounded around, so you remember that 3D shape? Kind of like a cone, yep. So down here, we're just going to draw a little teepee to help us remember. A lot of times I'll have a door kind of like that. Alright? Sure.
They make access to
Hold on,
out.
Naomi, I'll make sure you listen.
They do bombs out buffaloes and other animals to make an axe to chop down trees
Yes.
and make cabins.
Yeah, so when we get over to the animals, we're going to talk about that, Robert. It's very good. All right, now, Braden, let me see yours real quick. So Braden even added more detail than Mr. Rash. You can see at the top, a lot of times they would have the poles or the sticks coming out of it. So can I copy you and put that on mine too? All right. So it'd have the sticks kind of coming out. That would help keep it together. All right. Very good.
Was there flag back then?
Probably not. But if they had one,
But can I go ahead and draw it?
you can if you want to add that onto yours. That's fine. All right, plants. Anyone remember some of the plants that they grew? Hayden? Corn. Any other plants? Tyson? Well, they would have grass, but they probably wouldn't eat the grass. Maria? Squash. Squash. And one more.
Oh,
Yes. Alright. Make sure you got that.
we could put that cabin at the house with us.
The cabins were more Eastern Woodlands. They did. We'll talk about it in 1 second. But buffalo is the main one. Alright. Zachary, what was the main animal that helped the Great Plains people survive? Buffalo. Now, Kyle asked me a good question. He said, Mr. Rash, did they have any other animals that they used? Yes, there would be deer, probably in the Great Plains, and maybe some smaller animals like squirrels and foxes. But the main animal that they used to survive was the buffalo. Now, Robert, we're going to go back to what you were talking about a second ago. What made the buffalo so important for them?
They kill them and they make stuff. They give the bones and some stuff to keep them together.
right? And we're gonna list some of the things, Kyle. We're gonna list some of the things that that they use the buffalo for. So the first thing would be what? Well, even before that. Wait, let me ask my question again. The buffalo, what did they use the buffalo for first? Probably Tyson.
Like clothes.
Well, they would use it for clothes.
No,
Well, okay, let's think about it, because we've talked about this in science. In order to survive, you need air, water, food. So, Kyle, what do you think the most important thing they use the buffalo for? Eating. So they used it for food. But now y'all are right. Tyson, what else did they use it for? Clothes. Raise your hand. Who else knows something they used the buffalo for? Braden?
TV.
The teepees. What else could they make out of the buffalo, Maria? Jewelry. Get you a buffalo necklace. Natalia? Couldn't hear you. Shoes. Yeah. Awesome. Naomi. Weapons. All right. Now, they would. Yeah, like the. Yeah, you can. Perfect. All right, so here's the last question I want you to think about with your group. Okay, and if you want to move back to the group, you can. Why do you think they used teepees? In the eastern woodlands, they built these big houses out of wood that stayed in one place. We've talked about how teepees are like tents. You could roll them up and move them to a new location. Y'all can put your hands down for a second. Share with your group why you think they used teepees instead of cabins, longhouses, wigwams, things like that. Why do you think they did that?
They had the money to get food. So basically, I think the reason they had teepees is and they don't know that they started it. Everything that we see when they don't got nothing to drink, because the next started
Share with them.
I know what it is. Okay. We know those should
All right, y'all come back to your seats. All right, raise your hand if you want to share what your group thought. Why did the Great Plains Indians use teepees? Troy, what do you think?
because the buffalo
Okay, so the most important animal was what? Buffalo. Do buffalo all just sit in one place all the time forever? No. What do? They run, they move, they change locations. Now, if you had a longhouse back then, remember, no cars, no trucks, no moving trucks, no tow trucks. How are you going to get a longhouse? When you think about a longhouse, it's like as long as a school sometimes. How would they have been able to move that, or would they be able to move it?
They couldn't.
Probably not.
Because it's so heavy.
It's so heavy.
It also is into the ground.
Yeah, and they didn't have trains or airplanes or anything. So, Kyle, why would a teepee be so useful for them?
Because they can take it apart, and if they want to live somewhere else, they can take it somewhere else.
Yeah, they can take it apart. They can just put it back together when they get to the new place when they find the buffalo. Okay? So we're going to add that actually because I think that is very important to know. At the bottom, under where we drew the little picture of the teepee, we're going to do a little star. And we're going to write teepees could be moved to where the buffalo were. Ma'am. In the woods. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, what'd y'all say?
We said the reason we think teepees be so useful because if buffaloes move, they have to move, otherwise they'll be starving.
Yeah, they'd starve to death if they didn't follow the buffalo, and they wouldn't want to have to, they build a house, move, have to build a whole other house with the teepee, take the sticks down, roll it up, carry it, move it somewhere else. So it's easy to
The
transport.
rock will probably be heavy.
Hmm?
I said the rock that they have.
Yeah,
In front of it might be heavy.
it might, and they could probably find another one of those if they want to. Yes, sir.
But how, if buffaloes move at night, and then they're asleep, and then somebody's out there, one person out there, and there's more than 50 people asleep, and the one person is going up for food, and the other ones are sleeping, what will happen if the buffalo moves, and then
Good question. So they probably wouldn't just leave one person to hump the buffalo since they're so big. So there'd probably be a few. And if the buffalo started moving like in the night or something, then the next morning they follow where they went. They could follow the tracks.
But they sleep at night.
But some animals, remember, we've talked about this, some animals are nocturnal and they actually do all their hunting at night.
But then when I talk about they sleep at night.
Well, that's true. So if they slept at night, then it wouldn't be a problem. All right, real quick, I'll answer your questions in 1 second. What I want you to do is flip over your piece of paper. And I want you to draw what you think of when you think of the Great Plains. Draw something that's going to help you remember what the Great Plains Indians were like back then. Sure.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Alright, so draw some things that make you remember the Great Plains. Yes, sir.
What did they look like?
Just like people. You just draw people. So if you draw it, someone should come back. So draw a few things that make you remember the Great Plains.
I set the rubber jar.
So like Troy looks like he's drawing a buffalo and a teepee. You can. Sure. Do it, man. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
So,
Oh, so you did the Buffalo Jump at CTP? Yes.
I feel sad for the people at got dead. The plane people.
Uh-huh.
I'm sad that people got dead.
Yeah.
Because some people got dead.
Yeah.